Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 95th New Social Environment. I'm Charlie Schultz, the Rail's managing editor, and I have the pleasure of being your MC today for a reading of John Ashbery's work in honor of the poet's birthday. Ashbery would have been 93 years old today. Our readers include Anselm Berrigan, Todd Colby, Tonya M. Emily Skillings, and we are hosted by Marcella Durand, who is one of Ashbery's assistants as well as a close friend. And now to introduce our readers in the order that they will be reading today. Anselm Berrigan is the poetry editor for the Brooklyn Rail. Tonya M. is the author of A Swarm of Bees in High Court and the bilingual chapbook, the Grammaire des Eaux, the chapbook, A History of Bitch, forthcoming, Sputnik and Fizzle in 2020, and co-editor of Third Mind, Creative Writing Through Visual Art. She holds the George and Judy Marcus Endowed Chair in Poetry at San Francisco State University. Olivier Brossard is a member of the Institut Universitaire de France. He is Associate Professor of American Literature at Université Gustave Eiffel, where he runs the Poets and Critics program with Vincent Broca and Abigail Lang. Emily Skillings is the author of the poetry collection Fort Knot from Song Cave in 2017, which Publishers Weekly called a fabulously eccentric, hypnotic, and hypervigilant debut, an editor of Parallel Movement of the Hands, 5 unfinished longer works by John Ashbery, forthcoming from Echo HarperCollins in spring of 2021. Can't wait for that one. Kyle Dacuyan writes poems and makes performance. His writing has appeared in Ambit, The Offing, Social Text, and elsewhere. He is the executive director of the Poetry Project at St. Mark's. Todd Colby is a Brooklyn-based poet and artist. Colby is the author of 6 books of poetry. His most recent, Splash State, was published by the Song Cave in 2014. And our host today, Marcella Durand, whose most recent books are Rays of the Shadow from Tent Editions and Le Jardin de M, with French translations by Olivier Brossard, Joka Series 2016. Marcella, I pass the microphone to you.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you to all the staff of the Brooklyn Rail for making this celebration of John Ashbery possible. Nick, Fong, Sophie, Catherine, and Charlie, I'm so happy to be able to honor John today, and I can't believe it's been 3 years since his 90th birthday, which was the last time I spoke to him on the phone. I usually would give him a call on his birthday, and I can't help but wonder what he would think of all this. He was very much with his friends and colleagues, an in-person kind of person, and I love this group of readers who are here as I've seen them in person with John. The connections are strong between all these people who were his friends, his colleagues, his translator, assistants. We kind of call ourselves the group or tribe of John. And when we see each other in person, we always immediately attach to each other. I wasn't sure how much of an introduction to give for John because he published so much, translated so much, did such an incredible amount. He received pretty much almost every major award. We used to joke that the one he didn't was the Nobel Prize. I think that's the only one I can think of that he didn't receive. And one particular anecdote that I think of in terms of John and his work was he had received yet another award while I was working for him in the early noughts. And we were looking at the list of people who had received it before, and we sort of paused, and I said, how did you ever get in this group? Because his work was so radical and different, and he was always so much himself and not traditional. so always amazing. I'm going to begin by reading one of my favorite poems of John's, and this is a poem I've pondered over often, and reading it, I had many questions because the enjambment, if everybody knows what enjambment means, which is when the end of the line carries over into the next line, is so mysterious, and it doesn't quite work when you read the poem as enjambed, but it somewhat works when you read each line as its own line. So I'm going to try doing that, and it's also a poem that I feel I've been rewriting my entire life as well. His influence on me is heavy. So it's Rivers and Mountains. Rivers and mountains. On the secret map the assassins cloistered, the Moon River was marked near the 18 peaks in the city of humiliation and defeat, one ending of the trail among dry, papery leaves. Gray-brown quills like thoughts in the melodious but vast mass of today's writing through fields and swamps, marked on the map with little bunches of weeds. Certainly squirrels lived in the woods, but devastation and dull sleep still hung over the land, quelled. The rioters turned out of sleep in the peace of prisons, singing on marble factory walls, deaf constellation of minor tunes that pack the air with heavy, invisible rods, pent in some sand valley from which only quiet walking ever instructs. The bird flew over and sat. There was nothing else to do. Do not mistake its silence for pride or strength, or the waterfall for a harbor, full of light boats that is there, performing for thousands of people in clothes, some with places to go, or games. Sometimes over the pillar of square stones, its impact makes a light print. So going around cities to get to other places you found, it all on paper, but the land was made of paper processed to look like ferns, mud, or other, whose sea unrolled its magic distances and then rolled them up. Its secret was only a pocket, after all, but some corners are darker than these moonless nights spent as on a raft, in the seclusion of a melody heard, as though through trees, and you can never ignite their touch. Long, but there were homes, flung far out near the asperities of a sharp, rocky pinnacle, and other collective places, shadows of vineyards whose wine tasted of the forest floor, fisheries and oyster beds, tides under the pole, seminaries of instruction, public places for electric light, and the major tax assessment area wrinkled on the plan of election to public office. 62 years old bath and breakfast, the formal traffic shadows, to make it not worth joining after the ox had pulled away the cart. Your plan was to separate the enemy into two groups, with the razor-edged mountains between. It worked well on paper, but their camp had grown to be the mountains and the map. Carefully peeled away and not torn was the light, a tender but tough bark on everything. Fortunately, the war was solved in another way by isolating the two sections of the enemy's navy so that the mainland warded away the big floating ships. Light bounced off the ends of the small gray waves to tell them in the observatory about the great drama that was being won, to turn off the machinery and quietly move among the rustic landscape, scooping snow off the mountains, rinsing. The coarser ones that love had slowly risen in the night to overflow, wetting pillow and petal, determined to place the letter on the unassassinated president's desk so that a stamp could reproduce all this in detail, down to the last autumn leaf and the affliction of June ride slowly out into the sun-blackened landscape. Happy birthday, John. And we will begin with Anselm Berrigan.
Thanks, Marcella.
Continue.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to read an epic poem first by my father, Ted Berrigan, that he wrote in collaboration with a poet named Steve Carey. It's called 4 Metaphysical Poems. And it's 4 lines long, and you can imagine each line with quotation marks around it. I don't know why they did that, but they did that. 4 Metaphysical Poems. Get a job at the railroad. Loan me a few bucks. I gotta buy some pills so I can understand John Ashbery. That's the whole poem. I'm going to read one poem from Some Trees and then a couple of more recent things. This is my father's copy of Some Trees, and there's quotation marks around the "some" for mysterious reasons. This is called The Grapevine. Of who we and all they are, you all now know. But you know, after they began to find us out, we grew before they died, thinking us the causes of their acts. Now we'll not know the truth of some still at the piano, though they often date from us, causing these changes we think we are. We don't care, though, so tall up there in young air, but things get darker as we move, to ask them, whom must we get to know, to die, so you live, and we know. And these are a couple pieces from a book called Wakefulness that was published, I think, in 1998. Laughing Gravy. The crisis has just passed. Uh-oh, here it comes again. Looking for someone to blame itself on. You, I. All these people coming in. The last time we necked, I noticed this lobe on your ear. Please tell me we may begin. All the wolves in the wolf factory paused at noon for a moment of silence. This is the title poem, Wakefulness. An immodest little white wine, some scattered seraphs, recollections of the fall. Tell me, has anyone made a spongier representation, chased fewer demons out of the parking lot where we all held hands? Little by little, the idea of the true way returned to me. I was touched by your care, reduced to fawning excuses. Everything was spotless in the little house of our desire. The clock ticked on and on, happy about being apprenticed to eternity. A gavit of dust motes came to replace my seeing. Everything was as though it had happened long ago in ancient peach-colored funny papers, wherein the law of true opposites was ordained casually. Then the book opened by itself and read to us. You pack of liars. Of course tempted by the crossroads. But I like each and every one of you with a peculiar sapphire intensity. Look, here is where I failed at first. The client leaves. History goes on, rolling distractedly on these shores. Each day, dawn condenses like a very large star, bakes no bread, shoes the faithless. How convenient if it's a dream. In the next sleeping car was madness. An urgent languor installed itself as far as the cabbage-hemmed horizons. And if I put a little bit of myself in this time, stoppered the liquor that is ourselves truant exchanges, brandished my intentions for once, but only I get something out of this memory. A kindly gnome of fear perched on my dashboard once, but we had all been instructed to ignore the conditions of the chase. Here, it seems to grow lighter with each passing century. No matter how you twist it, life stays frozen in the headlights. Funny, none of us heard the roar. Thanks. Happy birthday, John.
Thank you, Anselm. That was great. Pills indeed to understand. So next we have Tonya, all the way from San Francisco, where it's sunny with clouds and trees. And she's reading in a beautiful field.
Well, it's funny. The field is an image from, I realized this is from New York, upstate New York, a photo I took. It is overcast here. But I think I first met, or didn't meet, but there was a moment I was supposed to read with John Ashbery in 2005. There was a hurricane that destroyed New Orleans, and there was an event at the Graduate Center. And he was one of the readers for the event to raise funds for that. Yes. So this is this is just a passage that I noted in the Vermont Notebook, where there's this gorgeous image of John and Joe Brainerd on the cover. And it's a passage I noticed as the turning point somehow in the text. But darkness, eventide, shadows, roost, perch, leaf, light, evasion, sentinel, plug, dream, mope, urchin, distress, waves, many, few, found, dreaming, unclad, season, solstice, many, before, few, undid, seen, artery, motor, before, sleep, come, month, asshole, behaving, foundered, sleep, reef, perfect, almost. This is from the Double Dream of Spring, the title poem, and it's for Garrett Henry, The Double Dream of Spring. Mixed days, the mindless years, perceived with half-parted lips. The way the breath of spring creeps up on you and floors you. I had thought of all this years before, but now it was making no sense, and the song had finished. This was the story. Just as you find men with yellow hair and blue eyes among certain islands, the design is complete, and one keeps walking down to the shore, footsteps searching it. Yet they can't have it, can't not have the tune that way, and we keep stepping down. The rowboat rocked as you stepped into it. How flat its bottom, the little poles pushed away from the small waves in the water, and so outward. Yet we turn to examine each other in the dream. Was it sap coursing in the tree that made the buds stand out, each with peculiar coherency? For certainly the sidewalk led to a point somewhere beyond itself, caught, lost in millions of tree analogies, being the furthest step one might find. And now, amid the churring of locomotives, moving on the land, the grass lies over passive, beetling its end of the journey mentality into your forehead. Like so much blonde hair awash, sick starlight on the night that is readying its defenses again as the day comes up. I love that poem, and it's the poem. I didn't know who Garrett Henry was, so it sort of sent me on a search for Garrett Henry's work. It's a poet and critic and author. And so I found Henry's Night and Day, and thought I would share that in honor of John's birthday. Night and Day. They tell me you're beautiful. I'm game, but it's seeing you later I'm nostalgic for this morning. Both our eyes uplifted, seeing straight. To have left me a moment ago is to have made a date. Because you've got the power, I have a conviction we throw fate to the winds with a sideway glance. All at once I'm doing something original, giving luck a break while I still have the chance. Look before you fall was the truth of the matter. We did, and the butterfly of smoldering passions was freed. Now no more of this concerning yourself with how to relax. This time, the possibilities can only describe the facts. Pretty up the picture by telling the truth. But there's nothing really remarkable in our living beyond our glory. How do we do it? That's not for us to say. And with our not refusing to, we solve the whole story. How I love it when you succumb to me by repelling temptation. Afterwards, you stop to light a cigarette. When you don't listen to what I'm saying, my mind tends to wander to what you may be saying about the day we first met. Do I remember? It's an unusual question. Your being here as living proof is a clue as to how to answer. We were out on the floor. The orchestra was playing. I put my arms around you and we held the dancer. My life before that was little more than enjoyable. At the crack of dawn, the birds would sing and scold me. The jig was up. You held the winning number. I drew aside the curtains. The world was too big to hold me. And I thought I'd end with a poem of mine, a draft of a poem of my own that seems influenced by Ashbery. It's called Incongruous Pantries, on listening to DJ Nice's Bill Withers set. Yet we gather in our sonic disunities, an incongruous pantry. The kale and mackerel go badly, eyes and smells lingering. Yet I long, even in dislodging somnia, for your weight, a stone turning away and into prepositional alliances, hewn and heft before, hewn and heft after. Yet an evening's inconsistency is no lessening of the shadow's distancing, is from, was from, will be from, will have been from want. Tense, taught as rigor, as 11th hour rigor mortis. Yet it isn't cheeky melancholy, but rather burnished clearing that a naive girl reckons a trivial sadness. In cities and nations tearing, what the naive girl can't answer, who is she, he, and what is she, he to you? Yet what might we have known had we cleaned come of its daily leans and leans? Is she lonely, he asked, from a desire-throated song that makes him bluer seeming. Yet seeing demands, yet seeing demotes, the us we easily purchase, yet seeing devotes us to the we instead might be coming to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Happy
Tonya.
birthday.
Love that last poem. I mean, I loved all the poems, but the last one by you was fantastic. I think Incongruous Pantries definitely is a juxtaposition that has a bit of the Ashbery, the incongruous juxtaposition. Thank you. So next we have Olivier Brossard, who is calling in from Paris, or it must be later than it is here. So thank you for joining us, Olivier.
Thank you, Marcella. Greetings. Thank you all. Greetings from Paris. In the early 60s, John wrote a series of poems in French, which he later proceeded to translate himself into English. And I will be reading a first the first section of his French poems, which again he himself wrote, and they're quite amazing. So I'll be reading in French, and then I'll be reading the John's translation. Les sources de ces choses étant très lointaines, il convient de les trouver. C'est pourquoi la brume et la nuit ont mis les scellés sur toute l'ardeur du secret de la recherche. Non pas pour le confondre, mais pour en assurer la vivante aération. Et pourtant, c'est plutôt dans la masse de la brume que pourront un jour se dérouler les mêmes contacts. Je pense à la danse des solides éclairs sous le froid et hautain ciel, tout strié de marbrures invisibles. Et il est de plus en plus évident que la vraie force de la température cosmique vit sous la forme de contacts qu'aucune intervention ne saurait résoudre, fût-ce d'un même créateur revenu sur les lieux désolés de cette première expérience, ce microcosme. French poems for Anne and Rodrigo Moynihan. 1. The sources of these things being very distant, it is appropriate to find them, which is why mist and night have affixed the seals to all the ardor of the secret of the search, not to confound it, but to assure its living aeration. And yet it is more in the mass of the mist that someday the same contacts will be able to unfold. I am thinking of the dance of the solid lightning flashes under the cold and haughty sky, all striated with invisible marblings. And it does seem that all the force of the cosmic temperature lives in the form of contacts that no intervention could resolve, even that of a creator returned to the desolate scene of this first experiment, this microcosm. And then I'll just finish with one poem, flowchart, no, that's a joke, which it's the first poem from Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror, which we just published last month in a French edition, translated by Pierre Ferry, Marc Chientier, and myself, and published by Joka Seria. And I will just read the first poem, which is As One Put Drunk into the Packet Boat. I will read it in English first and then in the French translation. As one put drunk into the packet boat, I tried each thing, only some were immortal and free. Elsewhere, we are as sitting in a place where sunlight filters down, a little at a time, waiting for someone to come. Harsh words are spoken as the sun yellows the green of the maple tree. So this was all, but obscurely I felt the stirrings of new breath in the pages which all winter long had smelled like an old catalogue. New sentences were starting up, but the summer was well along, not yet past the midpoint, but full and dark with the promise of that fullness, that time when one can no longer wander away and even the least attentive fall silent to watch the thing that is prepared to happen. A look of glass stops you and you walk unshaken. Was I the perceived? Did they notice me this time as I am, or is it postponed again? The children still at their games, clouds that arise with a swift impatience in the afternoon sky, then dissipate as limpid, dense twilight comes. Only in that tooting of a horn, down there for a moment, I thought the great formal affair was beginning, orchestrated, its colors concentrated in a glance, a ballad that takes in the whole world, now, but lightly, still lightly, but with wide authority and tact. The prevalence of those gray flakes falling, they are sun motes. You have slept in the sun longer than the Sphinx and are none the wiser for it. Come in. And I thought a shadow fell across the door, but it was only her come to ask once more if I was coming in, and not to hurry in case I wasn't. The night sheen takes over. A moon of Cistercian pallor has climbed to the center of heaven, installed, finally involved with the business of darkness. And a sigh heaves from all the small things on earth, the books, the papers, the old garters and union suit buttons kept in a white cardboard box somewhere, and all the lower versions of cities flattened under the equalizing night. The summer demands and takes away too much, but night, the reserved, the reticent, gives more than it takes. And if you will excuse my French, I'll just read the translation and conclude on that. Tel l'ivrogne embarqué de force sur le coche d'eau. J'ai tout essayé. Seules certaines choses étaient immortelles et libres. Ailleurs, nous sommes comme assis dans un lieu où la lumière du soleil filtre petit à petit en attendant que quelqu'un vienne. Des mots durs sont lâchés alors que le soleil jaunit le vert de l'érable. Voilà, c'était tout. Mais obscurément, j'ai senti frémir un souffle nouveau sur ces pages qui, tout l'hiver, avaient dégagé un parfum de vieux catalogue. De nouvelles phrases perçaient, mais l'été était bien avancé, pas encore à mi-course, mais plein et sombre de la promesse de cette plénitude, ce moment où on ne peut plus partir au hasard, lorsque même les moins attentifs se taisent pour observer la chose qui se prépare à arriver. Un regard de verre t'arrête et tu continues à marcher, secoué. Est-ce moi, ce que j'ai perçu ? M'ont-ils remarqué cette fois-ci comme je suis ou bien est-ce encore remis à plus tard ? Les enfants, toujours à leur jeu, les nuages qui grimpent avec vive impatience dans le ciel d'après-midi, puis se dissipent alors qu'arrive le crépuscule épais, limpide. Ce n'est qu'au coup de klaxon en bas que j'ai un instant pensé que la belle et solennelle cérémonie commençait, orchestrée, ses couleurs concentrées en un coup d'œil, une ballade qui accueille le monde entier, maintenant, mais doucement, doucement encore, mais avec tact et grande autorité. La fréquence de ces flocons qui tombent, de la poussière au soleil. Tu as dormi au soleil plus longtemps que le sphinx, mais n'est pas plus avancé pour autant. Entre. Et j'ai cru qu'une ombre glissait sur la porte, mais ce n'était qu'elle, venue me demander une fois de plus si j'allais rentrer, mais de ne pas me presser si ce n'était pas le cas. Le vernis de la nuit se répand, une lune à la pâleur cistercienne est montée jusqu'au centre des cieux, bien installée, enfin attelée à l'affaire des ténèbres, et toutes les petites choses de la terre poussent un soupir, les livres, les papiers, les vieilles jarretelles, les boutons de caleçon rangés quelque part dans une boîte en carton blanc, et toutes les versions mineures de villes mises à plat par l'uniforme nuit. L'été exige et reprend trop, mais la nuit, réservée, réticente, donne plus qu'elle ne prend. Happy birthday, John. Thank you all.
Thank you, Olivier. It was so beautiful to hear the poems in French, and just really honors John's intense connection to French poetry. And I just, fantastic. Thank you so much. What a job translating them. Thank you. Next we have Emily Skilling, who was John's wonderful companion up to when he departed for other shores, and a fantastic poet. And I'm so happy she could join us today.
Thank you so much, Marcella, and thanks. It's so wonderful to see all of your faces on John's birthday. I miss him so much, and especially on this day. Also at the beginning of Leo season, and John was such a classic Leo. And Marcella actually is the person who recommended me for the job of John's assistant. I was his assistant from 2010 to 2017. And I miss his gentle kindness and his sharpness, which was unmatched. I thought I'd read 3 short poems today. The first 2, I just realized both mention neckties, which is kind of funny because when John had an amazing collection of neckties, very beautiful silk ties, and when he passed, I made it my personal mission to kind of sprinkle them around to people who I thought meant something to John. And so I thought it was interesting that both of them mentioned. The first poem I will read is from Houseboat Days, which was a collection from 1977. And I found online in 1976 that he read this poem at Naropa. And he gave a little funny introduction to it. So I'll read his little introduction and then I'll read the poem. So he said, "This one is called Friends. and has a quote from Nijinsky's diary at the beginning, which is, quote, "I like to speak in rhymes because I am a rhyme myself." It also has other lines from Nijinsky's diary collaged here and there in it, though actually not the ones that sound as if they were quotations from Nijinsky's diary. I thought that was a very John thing to say. Friends, I like to speak in rhymes because I am a rhyme myself, Nijinsky. I saw a cottage in the sky. I saw a balloon made of lead. I cannot restrain my tears, and they fall on my left hand and on my silken tie, but I cannot and do not want to hold them back. One day the neighbors complain about an unpleasant odor coming from his room. I went for a walk but met no friends. Another time I go outside into the world. It rocks on and on. It was rocking before I saw it and is presumably doing so still. The banker lays his hand on mine. His face is as clean as a white handkerchief. We talk nonsense as usual. I trace little circles on the light that comes in through the window on sawhorse legs. Afterwards, I see we are three. Someone had entered the room while I was discussing my money problems. I wish God would put a stop to this. I turn and see the new moon through glass. I am yanked away. So fast, I lose my breath, a not unpleasant feeling. I feel as though I had been carrying the message for years on my shoulders like Atlas, never feeling it because of never having known anything else. In another way, I am involved with the message. I want to put it down, in two senses of put it down, so that you may understand the agreeable destiny that awaits us. You sigh. Your sigh will admit no impatience, only a vast crater lake, vast as the sea, in which the sky, smaller than that, is reflected. I reach for my hat and am bound to repeat with tact the formal greeting I am charged with. No one makes mistakes. No one runs away anymore. I bite my lip and turn to you. Maybe now you understand. The feeling is a jewel like a pearl. That ending is just one of the best endings, I think, of any poem. The feeling is a jewel like a pearl. The next poem I'm going to read is from John's 2015 collection, Breezeway. And in the poem, you might recognize in the title reference to the 17th century English poet Robert Herrick. The quote from Herrick is, "A sweet disorder in the dress kindles and clothes a wantonness." And the poem is called A Sweet Disorder. And then you might also hear a little nod to Keats' Ode to a Nightingale at the very end. A Sweet Disorder. Pardon my sarong, I'll have a Shirley Temple. Certainly, sir. Do you want a cherry with that? I guess so. It's part of it, isn't it? Strictly speaking, yes. Some of them likes it, others not so much. Well, I'll have a cherry. I can be forgiven for not knowing it's de rigueur. In my commuter mug, please. Certainly. He doesn't even remember me. It was a nice, beautiful day. One of your favorite foxtrots was on. Neckties they used to wear. You could rely on that. My gosh, it's already 7:30. Are these our containers? Pardon my past because, you know, it was like all one piece. It can't have escaped your attention that I would argue. How is it supposed to look? Do I wake or sleep? And then the last poem I'll read is from Quick Question. And I've always loved this poem. When I was working for John, I used to kind of sneak into his office and look at what was on the typewriter. And one day this poem was on the typewriter, and when he was ready to start working, I said, "John, that poem's amazing." And he said, "Oh, you really like it? I'm not sure I like it." But then I kind of convinced him, as did other people who also loved it, to include it in the book. And as was mentioned, I'm working on a book of editing some of John's kind of uncollected, longer, unfinished poems that I kind of found, a lot of them while I was packing up his apartment. And this poem helped me, as I revisited it, think about John's connection to the idea of the finished work or the unfinished work. It's a very short prose poem, and it's called Homeless Heart. When I think of finishing the work, when I think of the finished work, a great sadness overtakes me, a sadness paradoxically like joy. The circumstances of doing put away, the being of it takes possession, like a tenant in a rented house. Where are you now, homeless heart? Caught in a hinge or secreted behind drywall, like your nameless predecessors now that they have been given names. Best not to dwell on our situation, but to dwell in it is deeply refreshing. Like a sideboard covered with decanters and fruit, as a box kite is to a kite, the inside of stumbling, the weight of breath, the caricature on the blackboard. Thank you. Happy birthday, John.
Thank you, Emily. That was beautiful. I remember Emily one time saying, look at this line. He ended it at and or the or something. Who does that? And since then, I think so often, who does that? Who uses a line like, I wish God had put a stop to this? Who does that? Who puts that in the poem, right? Thank you, Emily. So we have Kyle next, and I'm so delighted to have him here. I'm so glad he could do it because he has another event today. I think today is a big day for events, right? So thank you so much for joining us. I'm so pleased to have you here.
Thank you, Marcella. I'm going to read 3 poems of John's. I was going to read 2, but then I sort of spontaneously decided to read another one, which I hope is okay. And it's partly because of this poem that Tonya read, The Double Dream of Spring, and that line, the churring of the locomotives. I remember my first encounter with the word churring was in another poem of John's. And it just feels like such a kind of Ashberian word to me of gears and choruses that are kind of up to something. So I'm going to read first this beginning to 3 poems, which is The System, and which also has an appearance of churring. The system was breaking down. The one who had wandered alone past so many happenings and events began to feel backing up along the primal vein that led to his center, the beginning of a hiccup that would, if left to gather, explode the center to the extremities of life, the suburbs through which one makes one's way to where the country is. At this time of life, whatever being there is doing a lot of listening, as though to the feeling of the wind before it starts, and it slides down this anticipation of itself, already full-fledged, a lightning existence that has come into our own. The trees and the streets are there merely to divide it up, to prevent it from getting all over itself, from retreating into itself instead of logically unshuffling into this morning that had to be of the day of temptation. It is with some playfulness that we actually sit down to the business of mastering the many pauses and the abrupt, sharp accretions of regular being in the clotted sphere of today's activities, as though this were just any old day. There is no need for setting out to advertise one's destination. All the facts are here, and it remains only to use them in the right combinations. But that building will be the size of today, the rooms habitable and leading into one another in a lasting sequence, eternal and of the great timeliness. It is all that. But there was time for others that were to have got underway, sequences that now can exist only in memory, for there were other times for them, yet they really existed. For instance, a jagged kind of mood that comes at the end of the day, lifting life into the truth of real pain for a few moments before subsiding in the usual irregular way as things do. These were as much there as anything, things to be fumbled with, cringed before, dry churrings of no timbre, hysterical staccato passages that one cannot master or turn away from. These things led into life. Now they are gone, but it remains, calm, lucid but weightless, drifting above everything and everybody like a light in the sky, no more to be surmised, only remembered as so many things that remain at equal distances from us are remembered. The light drinks the dark and sinks down, not on top of us as we had expected, but far, far from us in some other unrelated sphere. This was not even the life that was going to happen to us. And now I want to read this poem that is from As We Know. It's a short piece that I've been thinking of because I just think of, in this moment when we're so distant from one another, I think about how the interior and exterior worlds and rememberings are kind of constitutive of one another in John's poems. And so this is a poem I think of, and it's called 5 Pedantic Pieces. An idea I had and talked about became the things I do. The poem of these things takes them apart, and I tremble. Sparse winter, less vulnerable than deflated summer, the nests of words. Some of the tribes believe the spirit is imminent in a person's nail parings. They gather up their dead swiftly at sundown. And this will be some forgotten day 3 years ago, startling evidence of light after death. Another person. The yellow brick and masonry wall, deeper, duller, all afternoon, and a voice waltzing, fabricating works of sentimental gadgetry, messes he'd cook up. And the little hotel looked all right and well lit in the dark on the flat beach behind the breakers, stiff, harmless. And you are amazed that so much flimsy stuff stays erect, trapped in our mummery. And then I just want to read this third poem, and this will be the last poem I read, that is so tender to me. And I think of it because I really notice the ways that grief and pleasure are adjacent and continuous in John's work. And I also really, I notice how much deep feeling of friendship there is in his poems. This is How to Continue. Oh, there once was a woman, and she kept a shop selling trinkets to tourists not far from a dock, who came to see what life could be far back on the island. And it was always a party there, always different but very nice, new friends to give you advice or fall in love with you, which is nice. And each grew so perfectly from the other. It was a marvel of poetry and irony. And in this unsafe quarter, much was scary and dirty, but no one seemed to mind very much. The parties went on from house to house. There were friends and lovers galore all around the store. There was moonshine in winter and starshine in summer, and everybody was happy to have discovered what they discovered. And then one day the ship sailed away. There were no more dreamers, just sleepers in heavy attitudes on the dock, moving as if they knew how among the trinkets and the souvenirs, the random shops of modern furniture. And a gale came and said, "It is time to take all of you away," from the tops of the trees to the little houses on little paths, so startled. And when it became time to go, they none of them would leave without the other, for they said, "We are all one here, and if one of us goes, the other will not go." and the wind whispered it to the stars. The people all got up to go and looked back on love. Happy birthday, John.
Thank you, Kyle. I think you got at the heart of John's amazing sweetness too, which was another thing he got away with in his poetry, was just these incredible moments of such melancholy, beauty, and connection, right? And juxtaposed with something completely silly in the next line. Thank you. So now we have Todd Colby closing us out. And it's so interesting. I knew Todd in one context, and then all of a sudden John would kind of like magically levitate someone's book out of this giant pile on this glass top table he had in his apartment, and like a book would come out and he'd find it and he goes, have you heard of this person? I think they're really good. Have you heard? And I'm like, yeah, I have heard of him. I knew him when I was really young and a baby. So happy to see you, Todd, and happy John levitated that book out of the giant pile. So thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. You can hear me, right? I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. I feel very grateful for John's friendship and for not only his generosity and his joyous spirit and constant fascination and curiosity about the world well into his late 80s and 90s. And I feel like that was sort of a roadmap to how to get older as an artist in general, is just to be constantly amazed. But I'm also grateful for a lot of the people that he introduced me to. A lot of the people that are here today have become friends through John, and his friendship came at a particular period in my life that I was at a crossroads of wondering what it was all about. Should I continue being a poet anymore? And that reassurance was so beautiful. And I just want to maintain that sense of generosity to my fellow poets and writers in the community that we're part of. So thank you, John. Happy birthday, John. The first poem is called My Erotic Double, from As We Know. He says he doesn't feel like working today. It's just as well. Here in the shade behind the house, protected from street noises, one can go over all kinds of old feeling. Throw some away, keep others. The wordplay between us gets very intense when there are fewer feelings around to confuse things. Another go-round? No, but the last things you always find to say are charming and rescue me before the night does. We are afloat on our dreams as on a barge made of ice, shot through with questions and fissures of starlight that keep us awake, thinking about the dreams as they are happening. Some occurrence, you said it. I said it, but I hide it. But I choose not to. Thank you. You're a very pleasant person. Thank you. You are too. And then the other one is Wet Casements. I'm going to read three, by the way. And it has an epigraph by Kafka. And it just goes, when Edward Rabban, coming along the passage, walked into the open doorway, he saw that it was raining. And it was not raining much. And then the poem begins. The concept is interesting to see, as though reflected in streaming window panes, the look of others through their own eyes. A digest of their correct impressions of their self-analytical attitudes overlaid by your ghostly transparent face. You, infallibles of some distant but not too distant era, the cosmetics, the shoes perfectly pointed, drifting. How long you have been drifting. How long I have too, for that matter. Like a bottle imped toward a surface which can never be approached, never pierced through into the timeless energy of a present which would have its own opinions on these matters, are an epistemological snapshot of the processes that first mentioned your name at some crowded cocktail party long ago, and someone, not the person addressed, overheard it and carried that name around in his wallet for years. As the wallet crumbled and bills slid in and out of it. I want that information very much today. Can't have it. And this makes me angry. I shall use my anger to build a bridge like that of Avignon. on which people may dance for the feeling of dancing on a bridge. I shall at last see my complete face reflected not in the water, but in the worn stone of my bridge. I shall keep to myself. I shall not repeat others' comments about me. And this one, Canzone, I will read this aloud once a week sometimes. It's from Some Trees, and there's just, it's like tumbling through a poem. And hopefully I do it some justice, and we can all tumble together on John's birthday. Canzone. Until the first chill, no door sat on the day. When Billy brought on the chill, he began to chill. No hand can point to the chill it brought. Where a chill was, the grass grows, so it grows. Axe punished the chill, showing summer in the grass. The axe are grass. Acts of our grass transporting chill over brazen grass that retorts as grass. Leave the clay, the grass, and that which is grass. The far formal forest can use doubts, can sit on the grass. Hark! The sadness grows in pain. The shadow grows. All that grows in deep shadow or grass is lifted to what grows. Walking, a space grows beyond. Weeds chill toward night which grows. Looking about, nothing grows. Now a whiff of clay. Respecting clay, or that which brings on what can and no one can. The sprinkling can slumbered on the dock. Clay leaked from a can. Normal heads can touch barbed wire grass if they can. Sing the old song of can, waiting for a chill in the chill, that which a can is painting less clay, therapeutic colors of clay. We got out into the clay as a boy can, yet there's another kind of clay, not arguing clay as time grows, not getting larger, but mad clay, looked for clay and grass, begun seeming. Grass struggling up out of clay, into the first chill to be quiet and raucous in the chill. The chill flows over burning grass. Not time grows, so odd lights can fall on sinking clay. Thanks. Happy birthday, John.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everyone, for reading. It was so great to hear John's work in so many different voices. That was just great. I kind of am like, I wish I'd asked you all to read the same poem just to hear it read 6 different ways. That would have been amazing. Next year. Thank you again. The readings were fantastic. And thanks to everyone who attended. I guess if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll go off and celebrate John Ashbery.
You are welcome to put them in the chat. And I want to extend the Rails thanks to all of our readers and all of our audience members. Thank you, Marcella, Kyle, Tonya, Emily, Todd, and Oliver. I also want to add that John Ashbery was the first member of the Rails Advisory Board. And he always reminded our publisher, Fong Bui, to stick to his vision and to keep the Rail free at all costs. Thank you to all who came out today. Please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation between Kembui Olujimi and Yasi Alipur. And on Thursday, we will have Constance Llewellyn in conversation with Nathaniel Dorsky, and we'll conclude this week's broadcasts with a conversation between Judith Bernstein and E.J. Hauser. You're all welcome to activate your microphones and say farewell on your way out.
Bye.
Bye.
Marcella.
Well done, Marcella.
Happy birthday, John.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday, John.
Happy birthday, John.
Happy
Thanks,
birthday.